G'day guys, welcome back to a new episode of the Boundary Riders podcast, episode 118. So much to talk about today. We have seen the return of Jamarra Ugle-Hagan to the Bulldogs Footy Club, so we're going to be discussing that and the potential future of his AFL career. We're also going to be taking a look at Oscar Allan and his latest injury to see if he should really play again. Of course, we have our preview to the new round, the review to the AFL Fantasy round, and of course, much more. So let's not waste any more of your time. Let's roll the intro and get straight into it. Welcome to the Boundary Riders podcast, your one-stop shop for all your AFL content needs.
He looks at his options, and Jack Ginnivan says, boys, you brought me to the club to do just this!
But this guy has Flog written all over him.
From attack down, Reed sprints away from Petrarca, leaves him in his wake, takes a second bounce, takes a third. The sheer arrogance of Harley Reid. Finish the job, young man!
So let's get into the footy news from the week that was. So guys, as you can tell, obviously that my brother isn't here today. Third week in a row now, just got some work commitments. So a little bit spotty as to know if he will be returning for the near future. I'm sure he will be. He'll be doing the betting segment that he's been doing all year still. He's going to be keeping up with it. This week he's actually done a clip. He's actually, luckily for him, it must have been really tough for him to sit on the computer and, record 30 seconds for us. I know it must be really tough for him. I hope heart goes out to him that he had to do that, but he actually remembered this week. So betting segment will be back, be coming up later in the episode, of course. But this week, of course, we get to it in the preview, but it is the Swans up against Port Adelaide. I wanted to give you my thoughts just quickly. Of course, if you don't know, or this is your first episode joining, I'm a Swans fan. He's a Port Adelaide fan. And at the moment, I'm pretty nervous, I would have to say. I am going to be going to the game. Adelaide Oval, it does seem like the conditions will be pretty good, which I think does help the Swans a little bit more. So it's going to be tough, I think, for the Swans. Coming off the bye, I don't like teams coming off the bye at all, no matter who it is. And I think the Swans finally got a win. Thought they could have maybe used that as momentum, but of course, straight then the bye comes. And I think it's going to be tough for the Swans. I hope that they can really rally, because I don't actually think I've seen the Swans win a game at Adelaide Oval in some time against a South Australian club. I did see them win in the first gather round game they played against the Tigers at Adelaide Oval, which was very good. Then we played West Coast down in, where was it, the Barossa, not the Barossa, Mount Barker. And then we played last time against Collingwood, and we lost. And other than that, I didn't watch a lot of the Crows ones, didn't go to them ones. And because my brother had work, and usually he doesn't get them off. He usually just takes the ones off when Port Adelaide play. So I go to those games with him. And we haven't been able to win. So I would really like to break that drought this week. That would be really nice, keep our season somewhat alive. But I will get to the preview a little bit later regarding tips and that, but I'm not exactly confident. But let's move into some housekeeping, let's say. Couple of news topics to cover on injury fronts. First of all, on St Kilda, some sad news on Max King. It does seem that he has suffered an unexpected setback in his recovery to his knee surgery and is experiencing sudden soreness after training late last week. It is unclear whether he will need further surgery, but it looks pretty much all but certain now that he won't be returning this season, which is super tough. We've obviously seen the emergence of Ben King this season, and he's obviously got some rumours regarding him now about if he's going to be going to Collingwood next year. So I will be doing a trade video next week regarding a bunch of trade rumours, but he will be featured there as well. But Max King just hasn't been able to get on the park for the Saints this year, and last year when he was on the park, he just wasn't in good form at all. So I don't think his career's at a crossroads, but it's going to be tough for him to return. St Kilda have never really had a playing style that suits a key forward, that just to get permanent opportunities. It just always has been super tough. They've always played quite a defensive game style, especially under Ross. So it's going to be tough for Max King to return in any meaningful manner. We'll have to wait and see what happens, but it's going to be a while before we see Max King return to a footy field. Probably won't be seeing him in 2025. On Port Adelaide, it does seem that Ollie Wines, unfortunately, will be missing the next 1 to 2 weeks with a knee injury, so he will be missing the next game for the Power. Good news on Port Adelaide's front, though, is that Jason Horne-Francis seems all but certain to be available for this week's game. There was a bit of a shoulder concern on the weekend. He did sit out most of the last quarter against Melbourne. However, it does see that all signs point to him being all fine. On the scans regarding Jack Payne, it does seem that he has ruptured his patella tendon, meaning that he will miss the remainder of the season. I haven't said it in the preview. I recorded this yesterday before the Lions came out. They've pretty much all but confirmed that Ryan Lester will be going to Jeremy Cameron over the past few times he's been able to do that and do that pretty well. They're thinking most likely that Darcy Gardner will be shifted back. And Hipwood will go back forward, and Harris Andrews will likely take Shannon and Neil, I believe. So that's what the Brisbane Lions are kind of thinking going into this week. At the moment, I think it's going to be tough for Brisbane, but if you've seen the preview already, you would already know that I am tipping Brisbane this week in a pretty big upset. I'll have to wait and see. Good news on the Swans' point of view, though. So going into the game against the Power, it looks like Errol Goulden and Tom Papley are hopeful of a massive return. Tom Papley hasn't played since, round 2 or 3 this year. And Errol Goulden obviously injured his leg in that practice game against the... Who did we play against? Was it the Giants or the Gold Coast? I think it was the Gold Coast game that he got his knee snapped, basically. It was bloody terrible. But it does seem that both of them could be back this week. That would be great, especially Errol Goulden. But also, I think it's almost... If anything, it's probably even pegging on what the importance of both of those players into the side. The Swans have struggled up forward this year, but also their disposal efficiency has been dreadful, moving it around the ground. So both of them would be massive ins for the Swans. Still going to be tough, though, nonetheless. That's really all the housekeeping stuff. The first thing I wanted to dive into a little bit here is regarding opening round. So I think most AFL fans now have got the idea that they just don't want it, just get rid of it. However, Fremantle and somewhat West Coast as well, but more the Dockers, have pushed for to be included in opening round next year at least, especially for the WA clubs who have a lot of travel commitments. So they want to have that extra bye in the early parts of the year. So we obviously know that they've got basically the 2 New South Wales sides, the 2 Queensland sides, and then 4 Victorian clubs involved in opening round at this stage. Now, Carlton were involved in the first year. They did drop out because they didn't want to do it, basically, is my understanding. And Collingwood want to drop out, which I think is fucking ridiculous. They fucking don't even travel half the time, and 3/4 of the time, like Carlton, and they just get to say, oh, no, sorry, we don't want to be part of it. We just go, oh, yeah, that's fair enough. Collingwood don't want to travel. We don't want you to bloody stress yourselves. But yeah, I think it's pretty safe. I think it's a pretty good idea that Fremantle are involved in, all the WA clubs are involved in opening round because of the travel commitments that they have to, accommodate for. We'll have to wait and see how this pans out. Obviously, if they do want to persist with this, the AFL opening round, I don't know why. However, they just are adamant that they want this to keep going. I understand it's, profitable for the New South Wales football programs and Queensland's football programs as well, but I just don't think I think it sets up for an unfair start to the season with teams getting 2 byes and some teams not getting a bye until round 15. So I just think it's a bit unfair in my opinion, but I think they should just scrap it altogether. If they have to do it, just have a split round for that first round of the season, and then after round 2, everyone's back to normal. I think that's how they should leave it. If they're gonna have to have a an opening rounds per se, I think splitting it up so teams have like a bye up to round 6 is just stupid. I think we should just get rid of it and leave it. But on the side of this sort of article, or anyway. I think the WA team should be allowed to join opening round. I think they should just do it as a split round. Like, call it opening round, call it whatever the fuck you want, but let it be a split round. So after round 2 or whatever, then we're kind of basically set for the first half of the season before we then get into more bye rounds. Round 12 to 16 at the moment, the installments of it. So yeah, hopefully they do it better than this year or next year, because the first 2 seasons of this opening round haven't been good at all. But now let's move to Jamarra Ugle-Hagan. Of course, he is the big story, according to Tom Morris, Mitch Cleary as well. They have reported that Jamarra Ugle-Hagan has finally returned to training for the Western Bulldogs. Of course, start of the season was some concerns around him. There's been a lot of uproar regarding why he has been away from the club, or what happened for him to lose trust with the club. He's been gone for at least a month or so, I would say. But finally, Jamarra has returned to training. I think there's been photos circulating around that as well. Now, both Mitch Cleary and Tom Morris have reported that Jamarra Ugle-Hagan, the morning of returning, went to the Western Bulldogs team, and after the extended break, went into a meeting of some sort, first addressed the players when he got there, and he said that he's expressed remorse for some of his actions. He's hopeful of playing VFL football this season, and the club is working through the next period and what it looks like. Now, there's obviously been a lot of rumours regarding his future at the Western Bulldogs, if it is tangible, if they can go forward with him playing. I think it's going to be really, really tough. Now, I don't know about all the rumors regarding. I mean, I think I put out a TikTok that got like 140k views or something. It was bloody ridiculous. But so many of the comments are like all these rumors and speculation regarding him doing all kinds of things. I don't want to give too much airtime to that because I don't know what happened, and I don't think many people do. Some people do. Some people inside the club would know. Some people probably just throwing shit at the wall and just, hoping that that's what the case is. I don't really know. But I think no matter what he's done at the moment, because it's so serious, he took time away from the club. It just seems like it isn't tangible, in my opinion. I think that he probably will leave at the end of the year. I think it is great that he is back to training, and maybe there is something there for the Dogs. But, I mean, I think they've got a lot of hopes now on Sam Darcy. We've seen the emergence of him this season, how great he has been. And Aaron Norton, he's locked there for such a long time. They want to persist with him as a forward. I don't really know if they should just continue with Jamarra at the moment. Maybe he just needs a fresh start. Now, is that in New South Wales with the Sydney Swans? Is that with a big Victorian club like Collingwood or Geelong? I'm not so sure. I did talk about it in my trade video, I think it was about a month ago now, that Sydney were the front runners for him. And we've seen a lot of players, like big profile key forwards in the past, go to New South Wales and Sydney and thrive. We saw, obviously, Barry Hall way back in the day. And then we saw, Kirk Tippett, not so much thrive, but he was there. Buddy Franklin, of course, as well. But you do know that, it's outside of the media bubble, which is growing a lot more in New South Wales now and in Brisbane, but it's still a lot quieter than being in the heartland of Victoria in Melbourne. That's why a lot of players move to Geelong, because it's still in the Victorian state, and you're not moving away too far away from family as a Victorian kid who's moving back home. But it is away from the bubble that is Melbourne's pressure cooker of media. So I do understand that if he does leave. And I would understand on the Dogs' point of view if they do let him go. I think it is probably best to do it now before. I think it's next year he's out of contract, from my understanding. So I think it's probably better to do it now. This may be just a ploy to get him to train and, make it look like he wants to stay so they can increase his price. Because I'm sure right now the money on him or the value of him is extremely low because there is a lot of risk of taking a player that's been out of the game for, he hasn't played since last year, since that qualifying final. So there's a long time in between games of football. I don't think he'll play another game of AFL this year. I think that would be huge. I don't think that would happen at all. I think they'll let him play through the VFL for the year and maybe decide next year, if they do decide to keep him, to then bring him back into the AFL program. But, he's basically got to have a full pre-season now once again. We're at round, 15 at this stage? He's not going to be able to come back until, you'd probably think late rounds, maybe early round 20, maybe round 22 at this stage. Who knows if they're just going to... I can't see them chucking him straight into the VFL team. I think he's going to have to go through some training protocols and that sort of stuff before he even joins that team. So maybe if the Dogs can go deep into finals, they'll be considered if he's doing really well in the VFL, but I highly doubt it. I think that they'll probably just leave him in the VFL team. I personally believe that he will leave at the end of the season. I just think that there's too much water to go under the bridge. I think he probably needs a fresh start. And I think the Dogs need it as well. Clear him off their list. Let him go somewhere. I'm not saying this to as a hopeful Swans fan to get him, because I don't really know if the Swans, if they can get him for the right price, by all means the Swans should go and pick up a player because his potential is there. But there's a lot of variables here. It's very tough for a player to come in he's going to be joining a club that is very successful, who is, primed on success. They are always pushing for finals. And, granted, that hasn't happened this year, has it? I don't think it will. I think the Swans are too far away. But he's still going to have a lot of pressure on him, even though it's going to be less than the Melbourne pressure cooker that it is. So I think the Swans are going to have to get him for the right price. I think part of him coming back into the system is probably regarding them wanting to increase his value somewhat. Because if you're looking at it right now, what do you offer the Bulldogs for Jamarra Ugle-Hagan? Because the Dogs would want a first-round pick at the very least. But are you willing to let go of a first-round pick? I know the Swans, for example, are looking to pick up a academy player from my understanding. I think it's Max King. That's his name. Not the St Kilda Max King, but there's an actual Max King that the Swans are. I think he's a part of the academy. So that's someone that they'll be looking at. But are they really going to let go of a first-round pick or, accumulate enough points for a first-round pick to, be able to get this academy kid, but then also have enough, get another number one draft pick to then pick up a Jamarra? I don't think he's worth that at the moment. It's such a big gamble. But also on the other side of the coin, you've seen what Jamarra's best is. His best is probably worth that. But I think if the Swans want him, they're going to have to probably give up a first-round pick, in my opinion, or any club's probably going to have to do that. But I don't think he's worth, at the moment, because of their risk factor, maybe a second-round pick at the most, I would say. So, I think that's just going to have to play out. This sort of rumours and that sort of stuff, they won't die down. Even the fact that he's back at the Dogs. I think it was Luke Beveridge a couple of weeks ago said he's a Bulldogs player. He's not going anywhere. I feel like for the right price, they would let him go. I think that he has to say that as well, because the club would be saying, look, if you say that he's going or don't give an indication that he's staying, then clubs would just think they can rip him out for free. And on other facets of the recruiting stuff, they wouldn't let him simply go for free. They have to get something back for him. They would want to get something decent for Jamarra, because they invested so much into him. Of course, there was a number one pick. What was it, in 2020? And they've invested a lot of time into him. They thought maybe finally, because it was only 12 months. Oh, not even 12 months ago. He was one of in the next big thing. He was having some massive games of football. And granted, didn't have a great qualifying final, but there was a lot of signs there that Jamarra was going to be the next big player. They're already comparing him to Buddy Franklin. So I still like Jamarra. I think that at his best, he'd be a great pickup for any side, but there's still so much risk factor around it. So bottom line, if he is going to go, I think he will. I think the Dogs will let him go. I would not pay more than a second round pick at this stage. But let me know down below what you think about the Jamarra situation. I'm not going to try and get into rumours and that sort of stuff, because I don't think, who knows if they're even true. People just spout any sort of shit on the internet these days. So I'm not going to really entertain those sort of rumours. But, make sure to let me know down below what you guys think of Jamarra's situation. Do you think he should go? Do you think he will go? Make sure to let me know your thoughts. So now I want to talk about Oscar Allan. So over the weekend, of course, they were playing Carlton. Wasn't a very good game, if I'm being honest. Tom McCarthy is an absolute GOAT, though. Comes in for his, first game of AFL football and goes to top disposals for the team. So well done to him. But Oscar Allan, of course, got a injury. It was very innocuous. He was just running on the field and then all of a sudden pulled up very proppy. Looked like it was an Achilles injury. And when sort of that stuff happens, you expect that it's probably at the worst. However, in some good news for him, he's been sidelined with a medium-term injury confirmed with the damage to his left calf and minor damage to his Achilles. So he is relieved by that news, of course, that there was not a tear to his Achilles tendon. But that does bring up the question that a lot of people have been saying, that does he or should he continue to play for the rest of the season regarding his market value, so to speak. Now, we've seen some people come out, I think it was Xavier Ellis, a former West Coast player, come out and say that they shouldn't be risking him because the value is just going to go down if he gets injured. This was a couple of weeks before this injury as well, and it's a huge risk, like with Jamarra that I mentioned it before. So Jay Clark, a reporter with the Herald Sun, came out and said that he thinks the best thing for the West Coast Eagles is to protect your pick too, because people are saying that with the contract that he is expected to get with, I think it's Hawthorn, if he does join them, is going to be or equate to a pick 2 in compensation, which means at this stage, West Coast would have pick 1 and pick 2 in the next draft if the ladder sits the way it does at the moment. And if you think about it, I don't know how much further the West Coast Eagles are going to go up. They've had a couple of good games in the last month or so, but last week they just brought straight back to earth where they inevitably belong, if I'm being honest. But Jay Clark also points out that this should be the last time that we see Oscar Allan as an Eagle, or, at the very least for this season, which, at the first, I think we talked about this maybe a month ago. We put out a Tik Tok about it regarding it. My brother was pretty adamant on they should just let him play out the rest of his season and then, let him go. which I kind of agreed with at the time, but I didn't actually know that he was going to be potentially getting picked 2 as compensation. And by no means is he going to be given that big a contract if he's out for the rest of the season with a huge Achilles injury, because Hawthorn aren't going to risk an injury like that on that much money on a player who's prone to injury. Now, I do want to look at this on another angle as well, is Hawthorn shouldn't be offering him this much, no matter the injury here or whatever, because he's been prone to injury in the past as an Eagles player. It was only, a few years ago that he was off an ACL injury. Now we've got this issue regarding his Achilles. Now, granted, it's not a massive injury. It's just on the minor side of things, but it's such a huge risk for a team to make that they're picking him up as a free agent, that he could simply just be sitting on the sidelines for the rest of his career. Now, I'm sure it's not going to be, that's obviously worst case scenario, but it's still a massive risk to take for Hawthorn to, let him, bring him to the club on that big a contract that's going to be worth pick 2 for a free agency compensation for the West Coast. So looking at it now, if he's not willing to commit to the club, which he hasn't been able to at this stage, then I don't know if I don't think they'll do it, but I wouldn't be shocked and I wouldn't be opposed to the West Coast Eagles as a club if they said to him, look, if you're not going to commit to us, then we are not going to risk you out on the footy field, because if your value is going to drop as a player. And at the end of the day, the AFL clubs are a business and they need to think what's best for them. And I think clubs need to start doing that, because so many teams are getting rinsed now by players who just want to leave clubs at the end of the year, even though they're signing these long-term contracts. We saw, obviously, last year with Melbourne and Petrarca and Oliver. And Melbourne stood to their guns and, said, no, you can't go because you're contracted. But they easily could have we've seen so many other teams just let their players go who are on long-term contracts, who are still having to pay their contracts. Brodie Grundy's a little bit different. I don't think Melbourne or Collingwood had to pay that, but that he was signed to a long-term deal at Collingwood and then to Melbourne, but they just let him go to Sydney. And now the Swans are having to pay that deal because they wanted a ruckman so bad. But so many clubs are having to pay for these contracts of these players that aren't at the club anymore. And it's really bad on their, salary cap, which means they can't bring in new players. So if West Coast need to bring in these players, then because they need to rebuild somewhere, and I think they have enough in their forward mix, their tall forward mix, like Waterman, Williams has shown some good signs that they can cover an Oscar Allan. Let's be honest, hasn't had a good year anyway. Has he kicked more than 20 goals? I don't even think so. So I think West Coast are probably. I think they should hold up here and say, look, we don't, unless you're going to commit back to us as a team, as a player, we don't want you to play here because we need the value to go up for you. And if you get injured again, a serious injury as well, because this was pretty, thought to be pretty serious when it happened. I bet you there's a couple of Hawthorn recruiters right now thinking, oh, do we offer him too much? We may have to lower this just to, just cover our own asses, or, we may have to put some extra clauses in our contract regarding bringing Oscar Allan to the club. So if I'm West Coast now, I think now that you've been shown what the worst case scenario could be for an injury, for a potential big player to get rid of to bring in something massive like a pick 2, I think you probably leave him out. I think that's probably what you say, at least until Oscar Allan can say, I want to recommit to the club. And yeah, I think that's the only way you can go forward here for West Coast, because I think we've known this year that they've brought in these players like the Jack Grahams, the Liam Bakers and stuff. They traded away a top pick for pick 16 basically. They picked up Beau Allen, who could be a good player, but it's no pick 3. Now, granted, the player that they didn't get was Jagger Smith, I think, and that's not the greatest. It wouldn't be Jagger Smith. They would have got, it would have been Jagger Smith because they traded that out with Richmond. But yeah, Jagger Smith, who got an ACL, but you never know what would have happened. But that's a player they could have had, and who knows if he didn't get injured, maybe he would have been really good. Beau Allen really hasn't came on just yet. I'm sure he will at some point, but a pick 1 that they're inevitably going to get and a pick 2 would be massive for the West Coast Eagles. That would be huge for them to get next year in the draft, pick up some really good young kids that they can develop, and that's what they really need, I think, to come through because they can't continue to just use these top-up players because their bottom part of the list of young players, there isn't a lot there. Like, we just saw this week that Tom McCarthy comes in as a person who was playing, VAFA football 3 years ago. He's playing VFL football as soon as a month ago. And the guy comes in and gets the most disposals on the team. Like, that's not good. That's great for him. Awesome for him. But the rest of the team, that is terrible. How the hell are they not accumulating disposals? And I know accumulating disposals isn't the be-all and end-all of the fucking game, but you need someone to accumulate to get the ball out to other players. And he was not only accumulating the football, but he was using it as probably one of the better players in the team. So they need to pick up some kids to develop, and they seem like they don't want to do it. They're like, we can build a team that's got, all these guys that have already played multiple years, like the Liam Bakers and the Jack Grahams. And they have done pretty well as recruits, but they also need some kids to come through as well. And I simply don't think they have that, which is something they need to start focusing on the West Coast. But now, guys, let's get into the preview to the new round, of course, round 15, get into our tips and everything in between. But for now, let's get into it. A couple of big games, of course, coming up this round. We're not too far away from the bye rounds finishing up, luckily, because I'm getting a bit sick of it. However, still got 7 games throughout the weekend, 4 big games to take a look at for the preview. We'll be starting with the first game of the round between Fremantle and Essendon. Now, Freo have been one of the more informed teams of the competition over the past 5 weeks or so, while Essendon have been in some games throughout that period. However, were absolutely humbled against Geelong last week. Now, Goldstein is set to be rested for the Bombers, which does see that Essendon will be going with Vicentini for his first game. Everything indicates to me that the Dockers should 100% win this game, if I'm being honest. A depleted Essendon defence, end at home. Freo should really get a nice percentage boosting win. We talked about it last week that the Cats should get a percentage boosting win against Essendon, and they definitely did that. And Fremantle really should be setting themselves to do the same. However, Fremantle do have a tendency in the past to drop these types of games. It hasn't shown in the past month or so. They've been pretty consistent, but their history of dropping winnable games like this does make me have a feeling that there could be a chance here for Essendon. And with the Bombers being pretty much embarrassed last week, they simply have to respond before their bye. Now, obviously, I am still going to be going with Fremantle. I'm not that brave to pick against them because it's at home, and with the ravaged injury list to Essendon, Fremantle should get this done. However, I wouldn't be that surprised if Essendon send a scare through the Fremantle camp and potentially can knock them off. We saw last week against North Melbourne that they took their pedal off the gas in that last quarter against the Roos and nearly got run over. So Fremantle is still going to have to play a decent game here to get a win. However, if they play really well, then I think they should be getting a percentage boosting win. And if they're going to be seen as a team that can even contend this year, they should ram this game home, the Dockers. And my brother is also going with Fremantle. He is saying, being at home, they should be comfortable winners here. And with Darcy and Jackson, they should have a field day against Vicentini, the debutant, and really can't see a way for Essendon to score enough. We saw how tough it was for Essendon to score last week with Nate Caddy having no influence. Peter Wright had a pretty decent game, but other than that, Essendon really struggled to score, and it's going to be tough for them to do that against a much more fancy defence at the Dockers. After that, though, we'll probably get to the game of the round. The Cats up against Brisbane. A couple of big contests these guys have had in the past, of course, the prelim last year. Now, this is down at the Cattery, and the Lions, from my understanding, I've looked around, haven't won down in Geelong since 2003, I believe. And the Cats right now are in red hot form. Over the last few weeks, Brisbane simply need to respond after 2 losses when they've been in winning positions. They had 8 behinds kicked in the last quarter against the Crows 2 weeks ago when they should have won that game, and the Crows were able to hold on. And last week, even against the Giants, despite conceding some early goals in that final term, they still had 8 scoring shots and could have potentially stolen that game if they kicked straight, but 3 goals 5 cost them in the end. So Brisbane have to find a way that if they're in a winning position against a team like Geelong, they have to ram it home. They have to kick the winning score. But over the past couple of weeks, they haven't been able to find the finished product. Now, I want to talk about a couple of matchups that I think will go ahead in this game. I think Harris Andrews will get the job on Jeremy Cameron at the moment. I will be interested to see if the Lions will go and try and do a pseudo-tagging role on either Bailey Smith or Max Holmes. We have seen Jared Berry do it in the past. I don't know if he's got the capability, though, through pace to keep up with Bailey Smith for a whole 120 minutes. So it's going to be tough for him, but that may be an option. My brother has actually said that they should go to Max Holmes as a tagging role. So we'll just have to wait and see if either Berry will go to one of them two. We'll know at stoppage that Dunkley does like to sit on a player. So we'll have to wait and see if he sits on one of them. Now, another matchup I think will be interesting as well is who goes on to Patrick Dangerfield. It may be Starskovic. However, Geelong have got so many dangerous small forwards up there. You got Stengel, Myers, Close. It is interesting to see if Starskovic will go to Dangerfield, who's probably a bit bigger, or if they will decide Starskovic should go to one of the smalls. So that's really another big question there for Chris Fagan. On Brisbane's point of view, they have been called out already, which is Monday when I'm recording this, about their performance last week. And I think Brisbane are the perfect team to rally behind one another, get a real rev up from Chris Fagan, and respond. And surprisingly, this will probably shock a lot of you, I'm going to be tipping Brisbane to break their drought down in Geelong this week. I know that's a big call. We saw a couple of weeks ago against the Hawks when they went to the MCG. They had no right to win that game. No one thought they had a chance. And we saw a massive response from Brisbane. They had a brilliant performance against the Hawks at the MCG, and they got a good win. I think they can do it again. I think last week they were pretty poor against GWS. However, they could have won that game, and similar to the Crows game as well, they could have won it. If they can find the goals, I think they can kick a winning score here. And we saw how good Logan Morris was last week. Now, they need to find other people to go with him because he was the only multiple goal kicker for the Lions last week. I have a sneaky feeling that the Lions can get this done. I've been on the bandwagon of the Lions all year. I had a little bit of a thought through the review that I think maybe they've dropped off a little, but I'm going to give them one more chance. A little bit of part of me does think that the Cats have to have a game that they lose. They've won 5 in a row now. They've been probably the form team of the competition with the Pies, of course. They need to have a bit of a drop-off. So that's the big reasons why I'm going with the Lions. Of course, I know it's a big call. I know people can, roast me in the comments for that tip, but I haven't made a lot of big calls so far this year, so this is one of my biggest ones of the year. My brother is pretty typically going to be going with the Cats. He says that the game is down in Geelong, which does help. Morris seems to be the only one who's scoring consistently for Brisbane at the moment, and Geelong's defence should be too good for the Lions forwards, which, I can't really argue with. I tend to agree, but I'm still going to be going with a roughie. I'm going to be going Brisbane. Next up, we have the Boundary Riders Cup. My team, the Swans, up against my brother's team in the Power. Now, the Sydney Swans probably had one of their best performances of the year in the game before the bye against the Tigers. They were exceptional. Best game of the year from them. However, Port Adelaide, over the last few weeks since their bye, have probably been in their best form of the year so far as well. Such an important game for both sides, as I really can't see both of them playing in finals this year. This game really will decide if a team will be able to compete for finals this year or if they, simply will just be ruled out. Now, the Swans could have some big ins this week. We've seen the likes of Goulden and Papley as a potential starters this week. They've been called as tests. And Joel Amartey should return from suspension, which is a big in for the Swans. He was very good in the game that he was playing before he did get suspended. Now, on Port Adelaide's point of view, there is a bit of an injury cloud over Alia. The Power did stand up last week in the defender's absence, so that was really good. We saw Radicalier have a probably career-best game. So I'm not saying they can't cover him, but it's going to be tough with Alia because he's such an important player, especially for their intercept game. But of course, I'm avoiding the big point of this game, really, and this is the big issue the Swans face in this contest, is the fact that the Swans have a terrible record against the Power at Adelaide Oval. We obviously remember last time I went to this game, I was sitting in the cold, shaking my head for 120 minutes as we lost by 112 points. Got absolutely thumped by the Power last year. But if the Swans are going to make a late charge towards finals this year, they simply have to win this game. Unfortunately for the Swans, I just can't see them getting it done here. Port Adelaide have hit some rich vein of form in the last few weeks. It seems like they're playing for Ken's career towards the end of this season. Maybe they're going to try and make a late charge, get him a premiership. Who the hell knows? The Swans, I don't trust them at the moment. They had a good win against Richmond, but the Tigers weren't that good. And I still am struggling to see how the Swans line up at the moment. I mean, Goulden is a massive in. If he is in and Papley is in, I give the Swans a chance. If they aren't in, I give them no chance whatsoever. No matter the case, though, I'm tipping the Power. My brother's doing the same. He's put up the point that the Power have a very good record against the Swans at Adelaide Oval. Like we needed to mention that yet again. And it's pretty much the only reason he's picking Port. Now, he has brought up a few matchups that he thinks that should be going throughout this game. James Jordan, he believes, should go to Connor Rosie, while Rowbottom should go to Butters or Jason Horne-Francis, while Port Adelaide will likely tag Heaney. We have seen Miles Bergman do that in recent times for the Power. I mean, he could match him in the air, up forward, and could also, he's got the body strength to hold himself up in stoppage. But then then we get to the final game I want to take a look at for this round. It is the Expansion Cup, of course, GWS against the Gold Coast Suns. This may be one of the biggest Expansion Cup contests we have seen, probably since these two teams have entered the competition. There is a way that both teams can make finals. However, on the Giants' point of view, they simply have to keep winning due to the fact that they have not the greatest percentage. It is the second lowest in the current top 8 teams at the moment. Now, the Giants, of course, coming off a big win away from home last week at the Gabba against Brisbane, while the Gold Coast are coming off the bye, and before that point, lost their previous 2 games. However, they were against pretty good opposition. You got Fremantle in great form and Geelong down at the Cattery, of course, in great form, in really tough conditions as well. Now, do we obviously have to mention the emergence of Aaron Cadman last week? What a performance he had. Career best game. He's been waiting in the wings, it seems. He's been getting to contests throughout his, this season. Just hasn't been able to clunk marks, but it seems like everything aligned last week for Aaron Cadman. So can he continue that form? We'll just have to wait and see. Now, the conditions of this game seem to be relatively nice, which I think doesn't really hamper either side. I think it does help the Giants a bit more. So because of the last week's performance from GWS, I'm going to be going with them. I don't like teams coming off the bye. So the Gold Coast, I think, could come off a little bit sluggish. And their last few weeks of form against good sides, they haven't been able to find a win. So I'm a little bit hesitant on picking the Gold Coast at this stage. So that's kind of why I'm looking towards the Giants. And I do like their key forwards. Hopefully Toby Green's back as well. However, in saying that, the Giants have been incredibly inconsistent so far in 2025. So if they are any chance of making finals, they have to find a healthy middle ground. Their best this season has been absolutely amazing from GWS. We've seen some great performances from them, but their worst is probably one of the worst 4 teams in the competition. So if they can find that healthy middle ground throughout the rest of the season, I genuinely think they can contend. They need to start winning these sorts of games, these 50-50 contests, because games like Port Adelaide a couple of weeks ago, they simply can't have those sort of performances if they're going to have a meaningful impact on final. In saying that, my brother is going to be going with the Gold Coast Suns in this game. He has said that even though the Giants won last week, Hogan and Cadman kicked 11 of those goals, and he thinks that the Gold Coast defense shouldn't let them have that much sort of impact from last week. He does trust the Suns a little bit more than the Giants at this stage, even though it is an away game. So let's get to our full tips for round 15. My tips are the Dockers to beat Essendon, Brisbane to beat Geelong, Carlton to beat North Melbourne, Port Adelaide to beat the Swans, Collingwood to beat St Kilda, GWS to beat the Gold Coast, and the Dogs to beat the Tigers. And my brother's tips for round 15 are the Dockers to beat Essendon, Geelong to beat Brisbane, Carlton to beat North Melbourne, Port Adelaide to beat the Swans, Collingwood to beat St Kilda, the Gold Coast to beat the Giants, and the Bulldogs to beat the Tigers. And let's get to our certainty picks for the week. So my brother got the pick first this week. He has gone with the Gold Coast to beat the GWS Giants, of course, with the Gold Coast losing to Geelong in their last game. And unfortunately, I've only got one pick to go for. I have to go with my certainty pick this week to be the Lions to beat the Cats. Of course, the Lions losing to the GWS Giants last week. Oh boy, that's going to add another one to my tally of chilies to eat. But guys, finally, of course, we have to get to the tipping ladder for the channel. So Leviticus still holds the top spot. It's kind of getting boring at this point. He has 94 tips at this stage, leading by 18 points on me, leading 7 points, by the way, on second position, which is the boy from SNB, who's been holding that second spot for a while now. They both use their joker, but they're sitting in very nice spots, which is very nice. Looking way back at the tally, I've dropped down to 19th over the last few weeks. I am 16 tips behind Leviticus. That does mean that I'm going to have to get a almost perfect week in a joker round to come back. It's going to be tough. I'm going to try and do it. That's why I'm picking some roughies at the moment. I've got to make a charge. I've got to do something. There's been a couple of roughies throughout this last few weeks that I've missed. I haven't been ballsy enough to do so I'm going to have to make some big changes now. So now, of course, let's get to my brother's betting segment, Bros Bets. And just before we get into that little bit, I wanted to quickly mention that my brother had a big multi on the weekend for the AFL. This wasn't posted on the channel, I believe, but he went for a huge one. I think it was $64 if he got all the legs. And he got everything bar one, which was Paul Curtis as an anytime goal scorer. He was devastated. And I think that proves to everyone that if you're going to gamble responsibly. Don't think you put a lot of money on it anyway. But let's get into Bro's Bets for the week because he's a little bit more of an expert than me.
Hey guys, let's get into round 15 of the AFL. As always, we'll start with our Thursday night same game multi. First leg is Darcy Parish for 25 plus disposals. Second leg is Caleb Sarong for 25 plus disposals. Third leg is Luke Jackson for 15 plus disposals. And the final legs are Shea Bolton for 15 plus disposals and a goal, valued at $3.30. Certainty bet this week is Jack Sinclair for 25 plus disposals against the Magpies on Saturday night, valued at $1.40. And finally, the outside the boundary bet this week, I'm taking Isaac Heaney to kick 2 plus goals against the Power, valued at $2.85. And as always guys, Get it responsibly.
So, of course, next up, we get to our review for the week. Didn't have a great week in AFL Fantasy, so to speak, but I think I'm going to be making some big changes over the next month or so that will get the rest of my season, hopefully get it for the league, for the channel, get into the top 30. That's my goal now because there's no way in hell I'm going to win. But let's get into the review. Now, we'll start with my team first of all, and I feel like I had a good week until I looked at the league for the channel and wasn't very good in the end. My rank overall was 25,880 for the week, which was a score of 1,963. Now, I thought that was pretty good, but apparently that was terrible. So, looking at a couple of positive notes, Tom Stewart bringing him in last week was a good result. He got 110. Max Holmes continuing on his great form with the 131. Sheasel 131 as well. Rosie 117. Chera coming in, I think it was last week as well with the 120. Johnson, really good game from him as a rookie with the 104. The two Ruckman, Gawn and Marshall with 125 plus. And then Bailey Smith, thank God I had him as a vice captain, that I wasn't able to stress too much on the captaincy call because I think I probably would have gone with Dawson or Merritt. So probably made the right call in the end. Bailey Smith got the 136, so that was, 272? So not too bad. But there were a couple of really bad results in the end. Now, I had to take Angus Clark's score as the defender, so that wasn't great. Will Ashcroft only got 61. Wasn't impressed by that at all. Brisbane weren't very good in the end anyway, but still not very good. Hugh Jackson I brought in. I went to go try and change the trade when I realised he was going to be the sub. However, I couldn't do so, which was just lovely. You love to see it. And Levi Ashcroft, not very good with the 39. Caleb Daniel, after a really good start to that game, only got 78. So not the best, and overall pretty disappointing weekend overall. Now, before I get to my brother's team, we have to mention the debut of Tom McCarthy for the West Coast Eagles. What a performance from him. This guy was playing in the, VFL 3 weeks ago. Played one game in the Waffle, and now he's in and had the most disposals on the ground for the West Coast Eagles. 31 touches, I believe. Scored 101 in his debut game. He is a defensive midfielder. He's jumped up in price from the basement 230 to 293. This guy is going to be so good. Now, of course, West Coast do have the bye this week, but if you don't bring him in this week, of course, you have to bring him in next week. This guy is going to be brilliant for the West Coast Eagles. He used the ball exceptionally well off that half-back line for West Coast, and you have to bring him in. This guy is an absolute lock for the rest of the season. At the very least, if he can continue that sort of form, you could almost take him out for maybe an out-of-form defender. I wouldn't be doing that just yet, though. I'll be bringing him in for a reserve. I will be doing that in the next week or two, definitely, because I love the look of this guy. But, I mean, Tom McCarthy, where the hell has he been? I think I saw a tweet or something say that he was about 3 months ago stocking shelves at Coles, and now he's been one of the best players of the West Coast. Absolutely love that. Great story, and really good to see him playing well. But let's look at my brother's team now. Now, overall, he got 2,031 over the week. Very good score, I think, for us, out of us two anyway. His rank for the round was 12,459. Now let's take a look at a couple of really good players for him. Now, Wanganeen Miller did really well, 128. Lockie Ash has been brilliant for him. He got 112. Jordan Clark, 97. Rory Laird, 94. So very good through there. Tom Liberatore, 121. That's a nice score there. Brian Myers continues on his great form with the 112. And that's pretty much all we've got on that side of things. Now, on the lesser, the not so good signs, he did have Will Ashcroft as well, which isn't great. Tristan Cherry, not a great score, 93. I mean, I'm saying 93 is not a great score, but for him, he could probably do a little bit better. Christian Petrarca's came off a little bit in the last month or so, 81 for him. And his, big trade, he thought this was going to be a big money generator. Neil Erasmus, 39 subbed out. Don't think he would have liked that performance too much at all. Didn't really talk about it, if I'm being honest. He never mentioned it to me. But just looking at it now, I'm sure he's very disappointed by that score from Erasmus. So, with that being said, let's get to our trades for the week. So, my trades at the moment are going to be Levi Ashcroft out for Colby McKercher, Clayton Oliver out for Andrew Brayshaw, and Campbell Gray out for Harry Lemmy. Now, that last trade is purely just a placeholder at the moment, that Lemmy trade. I'll probably pick up someone else. I was going to go with McCarthy, but I just can't. He's a defensive midfielder. I've got Gray in as a forward, so I can't make that trade yet, but I'm going to be getting him in next week for El Harley, so that's all fine. I will be getting rid of Gray for someone. At this stage, Lemmy is in, but that's just a placeholder. So, to the two big trades. Levi Ashcroft out. He's dropped off of form. He's been brilliant. I'm not taking anything away from him, but he's definitely cashed out now. His break-even's going to be up upwards of like 120. He's not going to be able to do that. So get him out now. He did have one more week before the bye, but pull the pin at this point. And I've picked up Colby McKercher. Now, if you've watched North Melbourne over the past 2 weeks, he has taken over, in my opinion, the Harry Sheasel role that he had over the first year or two in his career. Playing off of halfback, getting a lot of touches, probably taking a few off of Caleb Daniel, if I'm being honest. At the moment, he's only priced at $6.67, which is very low for a guy who is playing the Harry Sheasel role at the moment. I think this guy is going to go big in the next month or so. So I'm going to be getting in early on McKercher. Now, Clayton Oliver does have the bye this week. He has done well over the past couple of weeks before the bye. However, I'm just a little bit hesitant on him. I could have gone with him or Will Ashcroft. I've gone with Oliver at the moment. I may root to regret that, but I've gone with Andrew Brayshaw as the in. Fremantle have obviously had their bye already. Brayshaw is such an underrated midfielder in the competition. Pretty much always scores hundreds in AFL Fantasy. So I brought him in as I think he's the highest averaged midfielder for Fremantle this year. So I'm going to be going with him. I could have gone with Sarong, but I think he's always susceptible to a tag. So that's why I've gone with Brayshaw. Now let's get to my brother's trades of the week. So he is gone at the moment. Boxall out for Johnson, Petrarca out for Horn Francis, and Toby Green out for Ned Long. Boxall trade to Johnson, that's for pure cash generation. Probably should have made that trade 3 weeks ago, if I'm being honest, but get in now just before that price starts to get way too high. Christian Petrarca out for Jason Horne-Francis. Returned last week. Horne-Francis had a very good score. Didn't play much of the last quarter as well, if you don't know. Had a little bit of an injury concern with his shoulder, but I think he should be fine. It was more rested than anything, in my opinion. And he's priced at $8.18, which is, I think he actually lost price, even though he scored 113. So his break-even's going to be right down now. Good time to get on Jason Horne-Francis. And Ned Long, over the last 3 weeks, has averaged, I think, over 110 in the competition. Priced at $8.75 at this stage. So Toby Green with the injury was a decent trade, I thought, for a while, but seems like now injury form a little bit, and I think that's probably a decent trade to make at this stage. So not too bad. I think those trades from both of us aren't the worst. I'm surprised he's kept on the Neil Erasmus. We'll have to wait and see how he's going to go with that one. But finally, let's take a look at the league ladder for the channel. So at the moment, the Cheetah Cub still holds on to top spot. Is having a pretty nice lead at this stage. 100 points over the Welshman, who is in second. Delusional Fools is in third spot after a pretty good week as well. He is only 40 behind the Welshman, so not too far away. Now, I did take a look at something, and it's not great. Pub Feed with Sauce has dropped outside the top 10. I always mention him every single week, and I'm sorry that he's listened to us because he had one good week, had a really good start to the season. Obviously, he was number one. I've mentioned it many times. He's dropped outside the top 10, unfortunately, so hopefully he can find some form, but for now, he is outside the top 10. Scrolling down the list, getting to me and my brother. My brother jumped me this week after a good game from him. He scored, 70 more points than me this week, basically, and he's jumped in front by 19 points on me, bro. That is absolutely crap. That's what happens when I bloody make a couple of stupid trades. There's a pretty big logjam around that point between my brother and Skiv Goats. Between 40th and 44th, there is a 67-point difference. So it's getting pretty tight around that middle of the table. Obviously, that's not going to matter. I did want to try and finish in the top 30. It's going to be tough at this stage because I think, I can see here 35th spot is about 150 in front of me. So I'm going to have to make some pretty big trades. Hopefully, I was pretty lucky though. I remember mentioning last week that I was going to try and get Charlie Curnow with his injury. He only scored 25 against the West Coast Eagles, so dodged a bullet there. But nonetheless, I think the next couple of weeks with my trades, hopefully should get my team in good order going into the rest of the season. But guys, that's pretty much all we've got for the review for this episode. Of course, make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you did enjoy it. But for now, catch you all in the next one. Finally, guys, we get to our Flog of the Week segment. And this week, the Flog of the Week nominations is going to be going to two people doing or working on the one job. So the Flog of the Weeks, the Flogs of the Week are going to be Josh Bowler and Rick Stone. Now, you may be wondering, who the hell are those names? Who the hell are we talking about here? Because they don't sound like anyone regarding the AFL. Well, these two people are the people who made the AFL fixture for this season. And my God, how have they fucked this up? So this is very late in the season as well to be complaining about the fixture. I understand that. But the fact that we have seen teams like Geelong getting the easiest draw between round 12 to 24 is ridiculous, considering this team finished third last year. Comparing it to Brisbane, who won the premiership, 2 spots above them. Now, I do understand that you can't predict everything going into the future of the, competition from, just ladder positions, because you don't know if a team's going to be a huge riser or a team that's going to fall drastically. So I wanted to compare between Geelong and Brisbane because they both have the bye at the same point and the rest of the games of the season. So looking at Geelong between round 17 to 24, they have the Tigers, Giants, St Kilda, North Melbourne, Port Adelaide, Essendon, Sydney, and Richmond again. So they play against the 18th place side from last year twice for the rest of the year at this point as well. They also play St Kilda, North Melbourne, and Essendon, which are teams that were in the bottom 8 last year as well. In fact, they were pretty low on the 8, if I'm being honest. The other teams they play are the Giants, Port Adelaide, and Sydney. Now, all 3 of those were in the top 4 last year. So, yes, they are hard teams, and they've got a bit lucky, the fact that the Giants haven't been the greatest. Port Adelaide have dropped off and so have the Swans. So they've got a bit lucky on that side of things. However, the fact that this fixture that was made at the start of the year allowed the Cats to have a absolute stroll from round 17 to round 24 to get towards finals is ridiculous that they have been given this much favour here. And looking at Brisbane's side of things, from round 17 to round 24, they go Port Adelaide, Carlton, Bulldogs, Gold Coast, Collingwood, Sydney, Fremantle, and Hawthorn. So, the teams that missed the 8 last year that the Dogs have going home are the Dogs, the Gold Coast, and Fremantle, and Collingwood as well. Now, you can't predict the future. So, they are playing teams like Port Adelaide, Carlton, and Sydney, all who finished in the 8 last year, along with Hawthorn. And 3 of those 4 teams are out of the 8 at this stage. They've got Fremantle, Collingwood, Gold Coast, and the Bulldogs on the run home, which are currently in the 8, but weren't last year. It's still ridiculous to me that all of these teams, bar the Gold Coast, finished in the top, 10 or 11 last year? I think that's right. All of them played in the top 11, yet the Cats play Tigers, Saints, Kangas, and Essendon, plus the Richmond second game. 5 teams that finished in, the bottom 6? Yet, we have Brisbane, who are playing every team around the mark who were in finals contention last year as well. Every single team, other than the Gold Coast, are in finals contention, and we've seen how good the Gold Coast have done this year. Now, granted, they have to play the Gold Coast twice because they're their rivals, they're crosstown rivals, you have to play them twice, right? But it's so stupid and so lopsided, the fixturing, that this has happened for the Cats. And this isn't just a Geelong thing either. Looking at Carlton, how have they been able to get North Melbourne and West Coast twice 2 years in a row? They haven't finished that low. In fact, they've made finals the last 2 seasons. Yet they've got 4 wins on the board. Just bank them in. Where would they be right now, Carlton, without those games? They would be down in the bottom 4 almost. And they've beaten, West Coast twice already this year. And they've beaten, they beat one. Yeah, they beat North Melbourne already this year. They get North Melbourne this week, which, I mean, if they won't lose to that at the MCG, I don't care what you say. This is so crap that these 2 guys, who are they? Josh Bowler and Rick Stone. Apparently, this Rick Stone as well is like a consultant they brought in from Canada. I'm sorry. They could have got me to do that and tell you, hey, Geelong should not have a run home that consists of the Wooden Spooners twice and then North Melbourne and Essendon, 2 teams who were down the bottom last year, along with the Saints, who, yes, had a good run home. But we've got to remember as well, the Saints had a terrible start to last year, and they were down in the bottom 4 as well. Yes, they had a good end, like I said, but they didn't start the season well. They weren't a good team. A lot of people as well would have seen on the outside looking in that the Saints weren't going to do well this year. So I don't know who your consultant was watching, but everyone outside of this guy would have known that this is just another easy win for the Cats. And this will be down in Geelong, I believe, as well, because they did play the Saints earlier in the year, and I know the Cats lost to them, but that doesn't mean anything when it was at Marvel. This is going to be down in the Cattery as well. This is going to be a thumping for the Cats. They're going to absolutely wipe the floor with the Saints. Mark my words on it. This is the 17th of the 6th, I'm calling it. They'll win that game by 60 points. Easily, the Cats. They will dominate. So, the person who made the fixturing this year has made a pretty shit job of it, I think, and we can look back at it now, and I think it's really scheduled poorly. We obviously have the opening round stuff, which we talked about earlier in the podcast, that you can't really blame on the consultants because that would be an AFL decision, not these guys. But the Josh Bowler, who's the head of broadcasting and scheduling, and Rick Stone, flog of the weeks this week because, my God, it's so lopsided, this fixture, that I know it's not going to ever be perfect, but it's got to be better than this. But anyway, guys, that's pretty much all I've got for you for this episode of the Boundary Riders podcast, episode 118. I'm pretty sure it's that episode. If you did enjoy it, make sure to leave a like and subscribe over on YouTube. And if you did watch it or listen to it over on Spotify, then make sure to leave us 5 stars. Make sure to follow so you're notified on the podcast and the review every single week. But again, guys, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. We'll catch you all next week.